Welcome to the Casual Birder podcast. I'm Suzy Buttress. As a casual birder, I take pleasure in watching the wild birds around me, wherever I am. In my show, I share the joy of birding. I tell you about the birds I've seen, speak with experts and enthusiasts, go on bird outings, and I share stories from birders around the world. My guest this episode is founder and director of Curlew Action, Mary Colwell. The curlew is the UK's largest wading bird. With its brown mottled plumage, long legs and down-curved bill, it's a striking bird to see, and its call is beautifully haunting. However, their population has declined massively over the past 50 years due to habitat loss and changes in farming practices. As a ground-nesting bird, they are vulnerable to predators and to other disturbances. They're on the red list of the UK Conservation Status Report, meaning that the species needs urgent action to prevent them being lost entirely. In 2016, Mary walked 500 miles from the west coast of Ireland through Wales to the coast of eastern England to raise awareness of their plight, and she chronicled her journey in her celebrated book, Curlew Moon. In 2019, Curlew Action was created, its purpose to ensure a secure future for curlews by supporting conservation activities, engaging with science and policy, and raising awareness about curlews worldwide. Mary's passion and drive can clearly be felt through her words and actions. She's the chair of the Curlew Recovery Partnership and instigator of a new educational qualification, the GCSE in Natural History. I spoke to Mary at last year's Global BirdFair, and our conversation was recorded in front of a live audience. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're still enjoying BirdFair, even though it's rather hot right now. My name is Suzy, and I'm the host of the Casual Birder podcast. And this afternoon, I am absolutely delighted to speak with Mary Colwell from Curlew Action. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you for having me, Suzy.
I was going to jump straight into Curlew Action, but I'm actually quite intrigued about how you came to like birds.
That's a very good question.
What's your passion? How did that start?
Actually, I came to birds quite late. My big passion when I was younger was much more to do with rocks and physics. So I did degrees in those subjects. But I had a boyfriend back then, who was a zoologist, and he loved birds. And the stories he told me about bird behaviour, literally, it was like the scales fell from my eyes. I couldn't believe what he was telling me about the lives of different birds. And that just carried on. And then I suppose I got into the BBC Natural History unit through geology, really, to help them on a series of geology. And then just stayed. And the more I stayed, the more amazing people I met, the more I explored the outdoors, the more I realised, what have I been missing all my life? Birds are just amazing.
Oh, I'm very pleased to hear you say that. So why curlews?
Everybody says, why curlews? And, if I said to you, why bullfinches? I mean, you wouldn't be able to really pinpoint it, because aren't all birds wonderful? But sometimes something just has a combination of assets, a combination of their being, which kind of speaks to you. So their song, obviously, is unbelievably beautiful and haunting and evocative, mixing the major and minor keys, making you feel happy and not sad but wistful at the same time. They look lovely. I like things to be a little understated. I'm not the great puffin and eagle sort of person. I like the more muted colours. G.K. Chesterton said, to be English is to love the colour grey. And I think curlews kind of sum that up quite a lot. They're grey, they're brown, they're cream. They live in landscapes which to me are absolutely evocative of so many emotions, where the land meets the sea, where there's mud, where there's waves, where there's sky, where there's wind. It's just, I love liminal places like that. And also the way they look. So they're tall, they've got a little pinhead, a great big long nose, great big long gangly legs, but somehow they're utterly graceful. So I just love the whole package, and the whole package is a fascinating mix of wonder, fun, beauty, song, lightness.
How did you come to be involved with Curlew Action?
Curlew Action was born out of this two things. the passion that I have to tell people about what's happening to the curlew. In 2016, I finished a big project at the Natural History Unit, and I kept getting information through from Ireland, actually, into the BBC office saying, curlews are going down the pan, please somebody highlight what's happening. And I managed to get a couple of radio programmes done, but that was all. And when I read into it, did I realise how far down the pan they were going in Ireland. So Southern Ireland at that point went from 5,000 breeding pairs down to 200. And I found out other places were suffering as well. So I set up this walk. It's totally independent, solo, unsupported by any organisation. And I walked from the west coast of Ireland, through Wales, and then through England, about 500 miles, coast to coast. And I went through places where curlews still sing and people still were used to them. And I went through places where they're just about hanging on. And then I also went through many, many places where they were just ghosts. And people had either completely forgotten about them or they were just some little memory in the distance. So, and then I realised what a complicated history we've had with these birds. How sad, how beautiful, how poignant, how they've been woven into our folklore, our mythology, our language, our dreams for a long, long time. And all this came together in a book called Curlew Moon. And out of Curlew Moon, curlews became, people were working more on curlews. They became much more into the public consciousness, not just because of my book, but I think people were waking up to it. And Curlew Action came out of that. A desire to tell their story. I think that's what it is. People need to hear the curlew story. They need to hear why that song is disappearing, because they're telling us something really, really important. They're telling us that our landscapes, from the coast to the lower mountain slopes and everywhere in between, which is all, curlews use the whole landscapes, they're telling us something's wrong. And what are they telling us, and how loudly they're telling us is that message that I want to get out. And Curlew Action supports me doing that.
Wow. Can you tell me a little bit more about the curlew? So you've already described that, it's a large bird, very strange-looking bird for people who are used to maybe our garden birds, quite statuesque. I've seen some recently up in Shetland and been lucky enough to see very close views of them. And where you mentioned about their plumage being, a mix of browns and buff, and they're absolutely beautiful when you get to see them close up, and yet they disappear into the landscape. It's such an amazing camouflage. Could you tell me a bit more about where they live, what they feed on, and how what we do to the landscape affects them?
That's a big story to tell. So most of the time, most people will see curlews probably like you did, or a lot of people on the coast in the winter months. And that's where you'll get big congregations of them. They hang around feeding. They use that beautiful long sculptural bill, and they stick that into the mud or under rocks or into wet fields and feed on the worms and the molluscs and the bugs and things that they find buried under the ground. They'll also pick stuff off the surface, but in the winter that's probably not as common. And that bill is amazing in itself. And in the Eurasian curlew can be 20 centimetres long, so it's really long. And the end is very, very sensitive, and it opens independently from the rest of the bill. It's called rhinokinesis. So it has ligaments, which mean it's like a pair of tweezers at the end, and sensitive. So when they stick it in the ground, they can sort of tweezer about and find something juicy. And so that's what they eat in the winter. And the winter time is not a problem for curlews. They're hardy. Once they get to an adult, 2 years old, they survive the winters really well. Once they get to adults, we've got them for 20, maybe 30 years. Then they come inland to breed, and they do it in stages. They start getting vocal and a bit flighty around the coast in about January, February, and then they'll move inland. And our British curlews go from the coast to either farmers' fields inland or to the lower slopes of hills, and they often fringe the edge of moors, and you can even nest on the moors themselves. And they pair up on the way, very often meeting the same partner again. I don't know that they're faithful for life. I don't think we know that yet, because we haven't studied them in that amount of detail, but they certainly, quite a lot of them we see the same pairs together. So they come inland, and then the males do all this sort of dancing and play fighting and flapping about and squawking, and they fly in the air and do this wondrous stiff wing display on fresh air, and they soar into the sky with their stiff wings and swoop down, and they have this bubbling call, as it's called, which is like a pan boiling over, or a sort of, it feels like the whole world itself is sort of joyously bubbling over. It's the most fabulous sound. And then the males and females get together. The female will lay 4 very large eggs on the ground, just to scrape on the ground. They don't build nests, maybe a few scraps of grass or something, but just sort of swirl around on the ground, and they lay 4 eggs in the depression. And then that takes about 6 weeks for the eggs to hatch, and then another 6 weeks-ish for the chicks to grow. That's where we have the problem. So we've lost 60% of our curlews in 25 years. And the reason is we have changed the way we use the land so much that they just find themselves right in the middle of all the major conservation issues that we face. They find themselves right in the middle of the way we intensively now farm the land, and particularly cut the grass for silage. The way we farm the land, which has changed so much since World War II, supports a lot of what we call mesopredators, so the fox, badger, crow, the recovering birds, prey populations, stoats, weasels, you name it. All these predators, which are middle-sized, most of them will find ground nesting creatures that live on the ground. So the predation levels are off the scale, and some populations, no chicks ever fledge. So we have the densest population of foxes and crows in Europe, and we have declining numbers of curlews, and so, you can see the way that's going to go. So grass cutting, lots of disturbance from agricultural machinery, draining the land, taking away the wildflower meadows and the old-fashioned hay-cutting meadows, turning them into fast-growing ryegrass that's cut multiple times a year. Lots and lots of predators. Increasingly, we found that dog walking and dogs running off the leads through fields and things, they're not hunting out curlews, they'll just disturb them off the nest, and once they're off the nest, everything can come in and get them. So, climate change is affecting them. Last year was a very bad year, an awful year for curlew productivity. In the whole of Gloucestershire, there are only 2 chicks fledged. Not a single chick fledged in Herefordshire or Worcestershire, for example. So we had almost zero productivity in the centre of England last year. And that was because it was very wet and very cold for so long. This year, we're sitting here, just before we turned the mics on, weren't we both going, I think I'm going to melt. It was so hot. It's been wonderful BirdFair for that, but boy, is it quite hot. And I think in some places there just haven't been enough insects for them to feed, or one researcher told me that he found little groups of chicks sheltering under trees, which is almost unheard of, really. So you can see that how many big issues are affecting them. Another major issue, and particularly in the uplands, is the increase in forestry. So we want to put our trees not where we grow most of our food, in unproductive farmland. And so many areas, and that's where most of our waders, not just curlew, but most of our waders breed, is now covered in trees. So, you name it, they suffer from it.
It sounds almost insurmountable because there's so many opposing needs. I know that you've said that conservation is 10% wildlife and landscape management and 90% people management. Can you tell me a little bit about the thinking behind that?
Conservation's easy, it really, really is. I mean, we know enough about the things we want to conserve on the whole to know what to do, but it's doing it that's the difficult bit. It's making the land suitable for wildlife again. It's turning the hearts and minds of people towards wanting to live with a flourishing natural world. And the less wildlife there is, the less connected we are and the harder it is to make those decisions. So the passion of mine is to help people become more aware of the wonder and the joy and the sheer spiritual uplift you get from a nature-filled world, so that when it comes to making the hard decisions that we need to make about climate change and trees and how we grow our food and the demands of the economy, we're going to make those with wildlife in mind, and we'll make those decisions willingly. They're not going to be forced on us. We will not win the 21st century battles that we face unless people want nature. That's the key. We're going to have to want these things in our lives, not just curlews. Curlews are a flagship. We have to want nature to be part of us. And to do that, we so need to get more educated and in tune and have what I call a natural conversation with the natural world again. That's when we'll start to make those hard, quite difficult decisions, but we'll have to do it willingly.
What is it that you, as an organisation, what are your primary activities in order to try and change those hearts and minds? And I guess it's not just the lawmakers or the people in charge of farms and all of that, but everyday people too, because we all need to have those thoughts.
We do. So Curlew Action, because I'm also chair of what's called the Curlew Recovery Partnership, which was established by DEFRA, which is a round table of the BTO, RSPB, GWCT, Natural England. There's a grouse moor in there. There's a little curlew project. There's a whole range of organisations. And we sit around the table and we lobby and we help government with advising on policy, good land management schemes to help ground nesting birds. But that's one end, the policymakers. And then we do a lot of work with farmers. A lot of people come with queries, and I've got curlew on my land, I don't know what to do. I need to cut that field for silage, but I know there's a nest in there. Helping, we do another big thing, which is we get field workers together. The people who put up the electric fences to protect the nest, the people who do the ringing and the monitoring, and the people who prepare the ground, cut the rush, anybody who does field work. We get those people together once a year, 1 year online, the next year in person, right across Europe, from Ireland to Finland. And they come together and discuss field work, shared issues, joint solutions, whatever. And it's been so successful. We also, very importantly, talk about ecological grief and get people to express their feelings. Because if you work on a bird like a curlew, it's really tough going. You know, it's emotional attrition every year. And in fact, I was talking to a lady yesterday from the RSPB saying sometimes the teams I work with, some of them are saying they just don't want to carry on because what's the point, you know? And I think that's real. And unless we talk about that, you know, one lady said to me, a young woman said to me at the end of one of our field worker workshops, and we had a session on grief, ecological stress. She came up to me in tears and she said, you know, I thought I was the only person who got back into my car at the end of the day and cried. And of course she isn't, but it's good to talk about that. So we work with politicians, we work with land managers, we work with field workers. We enable difficult conversations about grouse shooting or heather burning or forestry, which is a very difficult one. All those issues which conservationists don't like to talk about. But boy, do we have to talk about them because they impact wildlife all the time. And unless we work together, all of us, if we have divisions and we fight, the only thing that loses out is wildlife. You know, we can take the moral high ground here or here, but while we're shouting at each other, it's the stuff on the ground that goes down the pan.
Yeah.
So getting conversations going is really important to me. And then getting the general public, all of us, people like me, I don't know that much about wildlife. So I started in 2011, and now we will have a GCSE in natural history coming into schools in about 2 years' time. That was sheer bloody minded, am I allowed to say that on a podcast? Determination to be heard and to get the right people on side, like Caroline Lucas, like Tim Oates from Cambridge Assessment education person, just to keep banging that drum. And eventually people will listen to you. Yeah. So education, to me, the primary agenda for the 21st century is nature education. Because we will all fail to survive this century unless we all understand and love this planet again.
I just want to end on possibly a non-Curlew point, but it might not be. I'd just like to ask, I've asked all my guests to tell me about a fantasy birding day. If you could go anywhere in the world, any time period, how would you spend that day that's just for you, for birding? What would you see? Where would you go?
In history?
Any time.
I want to go to central North America on the migration time, and I want to see the great migration of the Eskimo curlews, which are now extinct, and I want to see the clouds go dark with passenger pigeons, because I want to know and feel that abundance. I want to know what this planet has given us that now we've taken away, but to see the cloud go dark with birds that are doing this wonderful pendulum swing from the Arctic down to South America, birds that use the planet, and we've managed to get rid of millions upon millions of them. I want to lie down on a prairie and watch the sky go black with the passenger pigeon.
That is amazing and a beautiful idea. So thank you for sharing your fantasy birding day, and thank you for joining me on the Casual Birder podcast.
It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you. To find out more, visit curlewaction.org. My thanks to Curlew Action for the beautiful curlew recording used in this episode, to Charlie Bingham for scheduling and organisational help at Global BirdFair, and to Oscar Henderson for recording and producing the shows. Global BirdFair in 2026 will be on the weekend of July 10th to 12th. There's so much to see, do and learn there, with presentations from speakers across the wildlife and conservation world. It's a wonderful event, and once again I'll be joining a wide range of wildlife podcasters in presenting our shows there live with special guests. I do hope you'll join us. To find out more and buy tickets, see the link for Global BirdFair in the episode notes. I do love to hear what birds you've been seeing, so send me a message on the contact page of my website, casualbirder.com. We'd love you to join us in the Casual Birder community hosted on the Circle platform. With really friendly and knowledgeable members and away from the clamour of other social media platforms, it's our space to share trip reports, bird sightings, photos, ask questions of the community, and just hang out. And the Casual Birder Bird Club is an exclusive event for the community. It's a monthly online meeting with regular attendees from around the world. If you've ever thought about joining our community, sign up at the link in the episode notes and enjoy a free trial period. I'm sure you'll want to stay. And check out the other links in the episode notes for ways to support the show's production and to be kept in the loop to receive notifications of Casual Birder news, blogs and new episodes. My thanks to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show, and to the Drones for the theme music, Short Sleeve Shirt. Check out their website at dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder podcast.